Welcome to today's webinar on CAMWorks 2016. We're going to focus on what's new in the software. My name is Robert French. I'm an applications engineer at GoEngineer. With that, we're going to just jump straight into the webinar today. So within today's webinar, we're going to be looking at what's new in CAMWorks 2016, but we're going to frame that in the context of a typical workflow. We're going to look at how the improvements can help us in a average day-to-day task. So within the typical workflow, we have the CAMWorks interface. We'll look at the improvements to that. Feature creation has received a lot of help. Making manual or inserting manual features is far easier now. Lots of improvements there. We'll look at the tooling organization. Lots of new options with tooling, making it easier for you to select the right tools. And lastly, we'll look at the improvements to the tech database. Just want to point out some of the additional resources available to you. First and foremost, there's the What's New PDF.
And it has a total list. I'm not going to be able to cover every single new feature, so there's a total list there that you can reference at a future date. There's also the GoEngineer website. If you go to our website, up in the top, we have a search bar where you can search for existing CAMWorks videos, blogs, technical papers, all kinds of resources that GoEngineer has developed over the year that you can reference at any time and use as an additional learning resource. And lastly, you guys all have access to tech support. Tech support number is found in our website in the top right corner. You can call anytime with questions concerning CAMWorks, and yep. So with that, we're going to jump straight into the software. So when we jump into the software, a few things you might notice if you're coming from, especially if you're coming from 2015 SolidWorks, it's a slightly different color scheme for some of the icons in 2016, but it's all the same old icons you guys have used for years. So just a little bit of an update with the color. One other thing I'll point out quickly, and we'll cover a little bit more in depth as we go on with this webinar, is an additional tab that's been added to the manager tree here for the tool tree for CAMWorks. So this is a quick way to access your existing tool crib and make changes like add, replace, delete, things like that. I'll jump into specifics on that here in a little bit. All right, cool. So we're going to go ahead and start with like a typical workflow on this part, a way I'd typically approach a part like this. I'm just going to go ahead and extract machinable features. I'm going to generate my operation plan, and I'm going to generate toolpaths. I'm doing this just to see where my current tech database, the status it's in, what it would provide me with in a typical workflow like that. So as I run the simulation here, and I apologize, hope it finishes here pretty quickly. All right, all of us have seen and used this before to verify toolpaths. And what I'm doing here is just, once again, double checking that my tech database is well suited and can handle the part automatically for me. So I can already see a couple errors here where I'm not recognizing features correctly. Order of operations is a little bit out of order, and definitely need to make some changes to my tools, or to my operations. So when I run the compare, I can see that this rectangular slot here hasn't really been found, and one of the key cause of that is this interrupt that we have when we would try to define the profile for this particular slot. So this is going to require us to do some manual feature creation. So I'm going to jump back into my feature tree tab. The setup we want to be in is obviously this first setup from the top. Right click, new 2.5 axis feature. So lots of improvements, like I said, to just your feature creation, lots of added functionality and making selection. So this is a typical situation where we would normally come in and use a sketch line to kind of bridge this gap and use that as a selectable entity, or maybe draw a sketch line around this entire profile. In 2016, we have a lot of new functionality once again. And when I jump in here with open chain, I can start to make selections. And one quick thing you'll notice right here is I get this red line that starts at the beginning of my first entity and ends at the end of my last selected entity. If any of you have done turn before, this might look a little bit familiar. It's typically called a join feature. What it does is it bridges interrupts in part geometry. As I continue to select, you'll see the pink line update to kind of create that last side to my feature profile. So we run into another problem here where we don't have an entity to select on this same plane where I've selected my first three entities. In CAMWorks 2016, you can actually choose entities from different planes. So this entity is, right in line with what I want to use. I just have to bridge the gap using this vertical entity here. And now I'm able to choose this entity down on a different plane, and my feature profile continues to update, including that new join feature. So as I continue to move around and make selections, I can finish off my profile. Oop, and I skip this vertical entity right here. And then we've created this feature profile with two new CAMWorks 2016 additions. The fact that we can jump between different planes to grab entities, and this join command that bridges this final gap right here. Jump into my end condition. I say down to the bottom. Oop, let me back up one step. That was a pocket. I need to be a corner slot. And so another quick thing you'll notice right here, when we're defining slots, they typically have open air entities. In CAMWorks 2016, open air entities are represented with these dashed lines, which make it very clear what open entities you have defined. Right now, everything's defined as an open entity. And so in this new panel over here, which has been a little bit cleaned up and simplified from 2015, I can jump in and change each of those air segments to solid segments. And I complete my feature, and there it is. Awesome. So I'm going to drag that up to the top for order of operations sakes, generate my operation plan, and generate my toolpaths. And now I can see those toolpaths coming in there, cleaning up, ignoring this kind of odd feature that interrupts what would otherwise be a pretty simple feature. Just as a quick point of reference, I'll point out some more functionality in creating features. I already have this pocket created. I'm going to recreate it just to show you guys some more functionality. I no longer have to choose edges. Edge selection can be a little difficult. You could always turn on your edge filter in CAMWorks, or in SolidWorks that is. But now in CAMWorks 2016, I can actually choose faces instead of edges. And so this can make feature creation a lot simpler, your selection method a lot easier, and it makes dealing with non-normal features that have some little oddities to their edges and things like that, makes it a lot simpler. When I jump into end condition, one other thing I'll point out is we've always had these great functionality with these end conditions, up to face, up to surface. I can simply click the bottom of this pocket and I've got my depth condition defined. Additionally, in CAMWorks 2016, we now have a direction 2 for our end condition. Now we don't have quite the same functionality here. We only have blind and up to stock. That still gives us, great methods for some complex features where our profile needs to be sent 2 directions. So really cool little enhancements there for manual feature creation. All right, so now that I've got all these operations created, and actually I'm going to drag these two up for, once again, operation order's sake. Now that I've got operations generated, I'm going to jump into the Tool tab. And the Tool tab's a great resource for seeing exactly which tools out of your tool crib are being used. So we're kind of used to this display method of pink text kind of being unused or undefined, right? When we don't have an operation associated with a feature or an operations yet to have a tool path generated. Well, here we see tools that are being used for various operations, and I can kind of cycle through those. This tool tree actually adds a lot of great functionality. You could take a scenario hey, this 11/16 end mill is broken out on our floor. I know I have this half inch out there, and while my 11/16 is kind of damaged and out of use, I can actually grab every single one of these rough mills and drag them into the half inch flat end folder. Now each of those operations has a half inch flat end associated with that. If I jump into my operations tree, I can see that in the couple places I had those rough mills happening. Additionally, in the tool tree, if I want to use a specific tool for a task, I can right-click that tool, and I can define an operation straight from it, and then choose an appropriate feature to apply that to. Lastly, tools, and kind of in the tech database realm of tools, if I right-click a tool, under cutting parameters, I now have options for defining, actually let me jump into a end mill. I have options for defining my tool, or surface feet per minute for my tool and driving my feeds and speeds from that. I can also drive it now with a feed per tooth or a chip load, and that's saved specifically to the tool. It's a parameter specific to the tool, just another way you can kind of customize your workflow within the tech database. All right, cool. So if I won't run the simulation again, you'll just have to take my word for it. It takes a little long. I won't make you guys sit through that. And this contour mill carving out this pocket is a 9/16 flat end mill. If I was to measure one of these radius, it comes in at a 1/4 inch, which means the largest tool I could use to achieve feature size would be a 1/2 inch end mill. So this 9/16 is going to leave a little bit of excess material in that corner. So I'm going to make a tool change. Jump into my tool crib tab. And so we've all commonly used these two buttons here to add tools that don't currently exist in our tool crib. The functionality of that in 2015 wasn't the cleanest. You had to go through a couple pop-up windows, just a little clunky. In 2016, that's all kind of been condensed into this one place where I can very easily, use the checkboxes I've used before, but get a real-time list updating, giving me feedback right away. Hey, these are the tools I have to use. And so it's all just, like I say, condensed into one area, a little simplified, makes it easier on your typical workflow. So just for example's sake, I'm going to go ahead and try to find a 7/16 end mill that's underneath my 1/2 inch limit. So I type that in here, and right away my list updates down below. I'm just going to choose a generic 7/16 end mill. It's added to my tool crib. I highlight the row and say select. And now that contour mill has an appropriate tool size. All right. And I apologize, I should have mentioned before, I'm going to be pretty comprehensive about what I do. It might be repeat information for some, but I assume we have users of all skill levels in here, so I want to kind of be thorough and not glaze over anything and kind of skip anything. So I'm happy with my tool selections here, but I'm going to jump into this rough mill. And currently my pocketing strategy is a pocket out. For whatever sake, my company's sake, the way we do things, I'm going to change that to a zigzag. I could potentially change feeds and speeds. This is a typical way to come in and kind of customize your uh, uh, operations. Actually, I don't know if I saved that one. Let me double check. Say zigzag, and we'll say OK. We see the updated toolpath. So I'm really happy with the operations I've applied to this pocket, my rough mill and my contour mill. In order to save this strategy, the most efficient way is to go right back to the rectangular pocket here. Those two operations are associated with this feature, and in CAMWorks, everything starts with the feature, right? When we start, we use extract machinable features, and based on those feature types, we get operations out of our TechDB. So I'm going to say to the TechDB, hey, for rectangular pockets like this, the strategy I just developed on it, I want to save that. I want to save that operation plan. So when I save this operation plan, I'm saving the rough mill, which I changed to zigzag, and the contour mill with the 7/16 tool I defined. So you can create a new feature condition, a new set of parameters defining this pocket feature with depth, type of material, or I can overwrite the existing one that I currently just pulled up 2 seconds ago and modified. I'm going to say create new feature condition. I don't want to override my rough finish. That's still a strategy I like to use on other parts, maybe not just particularly this one. The new strategy I developed, I want to have stand alone and be able to call upon separately in the future. So the only real change I made here was turning it to a zigzag strategy, pocketing strategy. So that's how I'm going to kind of name my strategy. I'm going to say zigzag rough finish. We're doing a rough finish just like we normally do, a rough pass and then the contour pass, but it's a zigzag, so just kind of name it like that. Since I said create new feature condition, after I complete this, it's asking me for the feature definitions that these strategies will apply to. So this box is about, or this pocket is about 2 inches wide, and the depth is 1 inch. Any pocket in the future that falls within these parameters, 0 to 2 inches wide and 0 to 1 inches deep, is going to get this going to be able to utilize this zigzag rough finish strategy. Typically, I would come in here and increase these values. That just ensures that this strategy is more versatile in the future. I can apply it to a more diverse set of features. And that looks good. All right, cool. So we saved that strategy into the tech database. The quickest way to access that, to get in there and make additional changes, I'll jump to one of the operations, edit the definition, and I'll jump into the Features Options tab where the TechDB ID number is listed. I can click that and it'll take me straight into the tech database, straight where that strategy has been saved. So it was rectangular pocket, blind rough finish. Actually, sorry, we got to scroll all the way down. There's my zigzag rough finish. I haven't quite applied that in the CAMWorks tab. So we see the 0 to 5 inches definition I created earlier, 0 to 5 inches feature depth, zigzag rough finish is the strategy. Currently, it's only applying to low carbon alloy steel, but I could obviously change that to whatever material group I want. All right. This is a kind of a messy way, in some senses, to create a new strategy. I have all these other ranges of feature sizes, and I've only captured one of them with this manual strategy creation. A great improvement that was made in 2016 to the tech database is when I jump into my features and operations, I can jump into user-defined strategies, expand that out real quick, and under rectangular pocket, I can now see that zigzag rough finish. It's only used once, one set of feature group conditions, the size, depth, material, and so on. It's only one place, whereas the rough finish where I kind of base that strategy from happens 28 times. So I'm really losing out on the scope that this strategy can apply to because I have very, very few feature conditions relative to, say, the rough finish. You can actually use these little buttons right here and make copies of an entire set of feature conditions and strategies. So I had 28 usages for this rough finish. Now this rough finish copy obviously because we made a copy of it, also has the 28 unique feature conditions. If I jump back into that features and operations, rectangular pocket, I can see all these rough finish copies created here with all the unique feature conditions. Now I can come in very easily to all these and make sure I've caught every kind of a feature condition that might exist. I can modify the parameters just like the window that would pop up in CAMWorks when we would right click an operation and say edit. And all located in one area makes it very pragmatic, very easy to jump through a list and not have to spend time copying each one of these existing conditions manually. We have it all in one place now. Just like we can copy all of them in one place and create all these additional feature conditions, I can come into that rough finish copy and say delete all of them also. So as I mentioned earlier, maintaining your tech database can kind of get out of control. Lots of new feature conditions created, hard to know which ones were the ones you created, the names start to get redundant. This is a great place to come in, delete all of those simultaneously, or create a great new uh, strategy for all those feature conditions all at the same time. All right, let's jump back. So when I was creating the when I was saving the operation plan, oops, let's try for one other one. I had the option to set it as the default. So that becomes a pretty important checkbox as you start to have these overlapping feature conditions where it's not entirely certain which strategy to use because several strategies apply to that particular feature. So setting the default was normally done in the tech database, just an extra step, had to drill through a couple menus. Now, in CAMWorks 2016, right in the CAMWorks interface, we have this default feature strategies. For every type of feature, we have our default strategy. We've been working on rectangular pockets. I can expand that down, and there's our zigzag rough finish that I could set as the default. Now, if I were to generate an operation plan, the zigzag rough finish would be pulled as the default for this rectangular pocket. I wouldn't have to perform the added steps of coming in and redefining tools and pocketing strategies. So that's kind of it for the typical workflow demonstration I had for you guys. I'll mention a couple other features here that are new with CAMWorks 2016. For that, I'm actually going to jump into, real quick actually, we'll look at the mill part setups for our different operations. Typically, these mill part setups would default to a user-defined location, and that could be really random. It could be in the middle of your part. It could be way off in space. There's no prediction about it. Now with 2016, the mill part setup is automatically placed top center of stock for every single mill part setup. This is pretty convenient. It's not a game changer, but it definitely helps prevent accidents out on the machine of crashing. This is just a far safer and more neutral spot to locate your program from. So like I said, prevents crashing because sometimes all of us, or sometimes a few of us might forget to come in here and finally define that mill part setup. All right, I'm going to jump in the tech database real quick for another improvement in 2016. As I mentioned in mill, when we look at our default features and operations, we had material groups that we could even further narrow down our feature conditions and apply custom strategies from. That same functionality, close one too many windows, let's jump back in. That same functionality has now been added in turn operations. So for all my different turn features, I have different stock material groups. So great amount more of functionality in turning, being able to really narrow in your strategies based on exactly what type of workpiece you're working on. Last couple things. For any of our volume mill users out there, if I jump into this rough mill, roughing, I'm going to change from zigzag now to volume mill. If I jump into the volume mill settings, our only entry method in 2015 was spiral ramp. Now we can use pre-drilled holes in volume mill. When I activate that, a new operation is created in the operation tree for an entry drill. You can notice the location of that. When I jump into the rough mill, volume mill next, you can see that I'm leading in right where that pre-drilled hole was created. On drilling operations, this can apply to most of our user group. We have a little bit more functionality added. We can add a dwell amount, so we can dwell at the end of our drilling cycle. We've also added gun drilling, and I currently don't have the correct post processor for this, but gun drilling is available. And that's about all I have for you guys as far as 2016 improvements. I will mention real quick in the Start menu, under your CAMWorks 2016, there is a What's New 2016 PDF file that'll list will have a comprehensive list of all the changes that have been made in 2016. And yeah, that's about all I got for you guys. Thanks for joining the webinar today. If you guys have any additional questions, go ahead and drop them in the questions box now. You can also feel free to shoot me an email. My email is listed right here at the bottom of the PowerPoint, rfrench@goengineer.com. Thanks for coming out, guys.